Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Sapienti. I am the Associate Vice President of Case for Quality Collaborative Community at MDIC. I am pleased to welcome you to the Case for Quality Collaborative Community April Forum. We are very excited about the two-day agenda we have put together for you and the list of talented presenters and speakers who will be providing updates and insights on Make CAPA Cool, the Voluntary Improvement Program Pilot, the Accelerated Sustainable Capability Pilot, Safe Space, and MDIAS. We also have our panel of experts who will discuss the impact of participation in helping make this forum possible. I also want to thank Desiree Steele for all of her time and attention making this forum a reality. We have a two-day, four-session agenda for you. Each day, we will have pre-recorded sessions in the morning, followed by a live Q&A, and a pre-recorded session in the afternoon with a live Q&A. Remember, we will be hosting a live Q&A at the end of the morning session. To get things started, I'm very excited to be introducing this morning's session on CAPA, Accelerated Sustainable Capability Pilot, and the Voluntary Improvement Program Pilot. Please welcome the CAPA team to kick off today's session and our CAPA Cool update. Thank you.
So thank you for joining the MDIC CAPA Process Improvement Program information session. My name is Catherine Merrill, and I'm a program director within the Global Quality Strategic Programs Group at Medtronic. I am also acting on behalf of MDIC as the program chair for the CAPA Process Improvement Program and Pilot. Next slide. As a quick introduction, this team really is looking to the future of CAPA. The goal of the program is to help organizations put the focus on problem solving within the CAPA process versus the more traditional focus on documentation, which will help organizations to improve faster. Next slide. In addition to being known as the CAPA Process Improvement Pilot, this program is also more commonly known as the #MakeCAPACool program. As mentioned on the previous slide, we are putting a strong emphasis on shifting the focus towards problem solving to allow organizations to improve faster. We are partnering together with MDIC, FDA, and industry to simplify and enable improvement in such a way that we positively impact our patients. I want to mention and thank the strongly dedicated team of over 30 members whose continued engagement is the reason we have made the progress that we have today. What has been so great about the program has been that the participation has never wavered, and the team works very well together and onboards new members quite easily. Next slide. During this presentation, I will be providing a very quick program overview before diving into the results we are seeing in the pilot sites. Next slide. The next two slides will give you a quick overview of the Make CAPA Cool program for those of you who are new to the topic. So to give you a brief program summary, the CAPA Process Improvement Workstream was initiated in response to the industry-wide struggle resulting from the current CAPA framework. Basically, there are thousands of employees who absolutely love to solve problems, but don't necessarily want to own a CAPA. The team was put together to leverage cross-industry best practices in collaboration to fundamentally recast CAPA as a continuous improvement framework. Basically, our goal is to enable efficient improvements that matter. The team has already completed a lot of work, and I wanted to highlight a few of the activities that were key to us getting to where we are in the pilot today. The team leveraged results from an industry-wide survey and a benchmarking activity of 10 non-medical device companies that had strong continuous improvement systems, and we leveraged that to develop a risk-based CAPA framework. The framework was published in an initial white paper, which you can find on the MDIC website. The team then developed materials to support both auditors and the pilot participants and created standardized data collection tools managed by McKinsey to ensure confidentiality. And this is now the source of the pilot data that you'll get to see today. There's also a strong ongoing pilot site support in the form of bi-weekly report out, sub-teams, and a monthly meeting with only pilot site leaders for active pilot sites, where they have an opportunity to raise concerns and to learn from each other. There are currently already a total of 22 sites enrolled in the pilot, with some organizations expanding to have multiple sites. The pilot site data collection has been extended through July to ensure that the results we are seeing are statistically significant, but we still are on track to complete the final white paper summarizing our work by the end of this year. Next slide. This slide provides a high-level summary of the working group strategy as they meet 2 to 4 times a month to build a deeper understanding of the risk-based framework. I want to start by noting that the team recognizes and acknowledges that there is more than one way to be compliant. So if you're applying a risk-based approach, this is one example of a risk-based approach to CAPA. So in order to learn in a pilot environment, it was necessary that we align around a single example of a risk-based approach. So we do continue to build and iterate and test as we learn and refine each of the framework elements, and we are about 75% complete with this process. I also wanted to note that we're using these pilot learnings to identify a higher level flow that will only highlight the key activities to be included in a risk-based approach. Those that we've learned in the pilot are significant, regardless of what the process may look like at an organization. This simpler and higher level flow will be included within the white paper. Next slide. Over the next 4 slides, I wanted to share the results we're seeing so far across the pilot sites. First, pilot sites are experiencing clearer CAPA escalation decisions, faster CAPA cycle times for lower risk issues. We're seeing that trending and increased process controls is being encouraged. The risk management systems are being strengthened. Continuous improvement is being promoted. More preventative actions are being considered. Employees are actually excited to own a fast-track CAPA. We're seeing positive audit results, and I do have a subsequent slide that walks you through that later in this presentation. We're seeing more time being able to be spent on problem solving, and that's because the CAPA documentation is simpler. So overall, we're seeing that the framework is supporting those quality behaviors that we're attempting to encourage with the CAPA framework. And I have collected a group of pilot site responses to share with you. I could have pages and pages and slides of the feedback that we've received, but I captured those things that I thought would make an impact and give you a general idea of what we are seeing. So the first one is to take full advantage of the framework. They're better understanding their trend thresholds, and they've seen that it's really brought the risk management files to life. So it's making the whole QMS stronger. They're also seeing that they're making better decisions about when to open a CAPA. And CAPA timelines from investigation to closure have been reduced by 50%. So you'll see that on some subsequent slides. And the most important thing is the issues are not being repeated. So we're opening more CAPAs where we haven't in the past, and people see they can make improvements, and then they open a fast-track CAPA. The last thing I wanted to share was that they're gaining a deeper understanding of the product as they dig into their risk assessments. Next slide. This is the first of 3 slides showing results from our pilot data collection. The first slide is here to show 2 of the shifts we're seeing at our pilot sites. The bar chart on the left shows that about 70% of the CAPAs now go through the fast-track CAPA pathway, compared to the 5% that was seen during the baseline data collection. So what you're seeing is about a 70-30 split between both fast-track and external CAPAs. The bar chart on the right signals the shift we're seeing in the clarity of when a CAPA needs to be opened. So about 80% of CAPAs are now being triaged by individuals versus a whole CAPA board, which does indicate the framework has made it clearer as to when they need to open a CAPA. And you did see this earlier in the comments that I shared from some of the pilot site leaders. Next slide. This slide is actually my favorite because it visibly shows the impact of a risk-based approach to CAPA on the CAPA cycle times. The top distribution in gray is the baseline data with a total population of 201 closed CAPAs. You'll notice that a majority of the CAPAs have cycle times greater than 180 days. And in the next slide, I'll show you just how long in average those CAPAs are lasting. The bottom distribution in dark blue are pilot CAPAs. You'll notice that as many as 67 CAPAs have closed in less than 30 days, with almost 75% being closed in less than 60 days, which is 2 months. This tangibly demonstrates the power of the framework and that it is allowing organizations literally to improve their processes faster. Next slide. This last results slide provides the average cycle times by phase to show you where the impact is actually being seen. The first bar chart on the left shows that in the baseline CAPAs, the time to initiate the CAPA was about 8 days. The time to implement the improvement was about 264 days. The time to close, which includes the effectiveness check, was about 112 days. Leading to an overall cycle time of 381 days, which is over a year. This is in comparison to the 2 bar charts on the right from the pilot. The first one being the more traditional external CAPAs, and the second one is for fast track CAPAs, where you see that for a fast track CAPA, the time to initiate is 7 days, time to implement about 35 days, time to close, which includes the effectiveness check, 21 days, for an overall cycle time of 63 days. For the external CAPAs with an overall cycle time so far, for those closed CAPAs, it's 166 days. Now, granted, our sample size is only 9, but what we did do is we wanted to get an estimate that as the other CAPAs that are currently still open begin getting closed, we wanted to create an estimate of where we expect this data to land, which we can confirm later. So we did use a weighted average, and we also included the 70-30 split of fast track CAPAs versus external. And we estimated an expected cycle time reduction of about 60% overall, or about 155 days, which is less than 6 months. So we'll continue to check against that estimate as we move forward in the pilot and we continue to gather additional data. So you'll hear more about that in later presentations. Next slide. On this slide, I also wanted to highlight that the application of a risk-based approach is aligned with both 820 and ISO. Additional detail can be found in the initial white paper published on the MDIC website. Additionally, each pilot site has an opportunity to take part in what we call the 3-month progress check. This is where the pilot site and FDA team members engage to review the site's application of the framework within their systems to ensure it meets the intent of regulations. This has been an absolutely value-added series of meetings for the pilot sites. Sites have received excellent input from our FDA team members, which has enabled them to strengthen their CAPA process without adding any unnecessary burden. Next slide. We also wanted to share feedback from the auditors, as we know it can be an area of concern for industry, and the results we have seen provide tangible evidence that the framework meets the intent of regulations. Across the pilot sites, we have seen 17 different audits, 9 of these being external, such as MDSAP, and we have had absolutely no findings against the CAPA process or framework. So you can also see here some of the feedback that we've received from individual auditors that we wanted to share with you. All in all, they've been excited about the pilot and have appreciated the white paper and the online training that we had made available for them. Next slide. So I wanted to close out this session by letting you know more about how you could engage with the pilot, you can learn more on the MDIC website by either reading the initial white paper or completing the online training, which is about 35 minutes, or you can contact the MDIC Case for Quality Program Manager or me as the program chair if you're interested in participating. So once again, I wanted to thank you for joining us with the CAPA Process Improvement Pilot Information Session.
Hey everyone, this is Kim Kaplan here with my colleague Rob Becker to give an update on the Case for Quality Voluntary Improvement Program. Next slide. We'll start as usual with our annual program adoption data. I do want to note that the 2021 data obviously represents just a partial year since we're only here in April, but you can see year over year we've continued to trend upwards as we've grown the pilot. Next slide. Additionally, we've continued to expand the number of folks who are trained as appraisers in the program. You can see that that's continued an upward trend in terms of the training, but we did have to take a pause in 2020 on being able to complete observations for new appraisers. So you can see there's a slight stagnation there, but we're excited to pick up with that again in 2021. Next slide. All right, continuing on with wrapping up 2020 and our program effectiveness metrics. We had 167 respondents, the majority being from reappraisals, but we were able to complete a few year one appraisals as well. As you can see, the large majority had a positive experience with the appraisal, believed it identified opportunities to improve product quality, saw no conflict with compliance in the appraisal activities, and believed that the appraisal provided broader value add. Our Net Promoter Score remains high at positive 56. When we looked into why it decreased a little bit, it was largely due to participants still preferring having a live activity versus a virtual one, which is how we had to transition in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. And now we can give an update on those virtual appraisal metrics as well. So out of our respondents, 114 participated in virtual appraisals. You can see the vast majority had no major technical or other difficulties in the remote environment. 96% were somewhat or completely satisfied with the remote approach. 94% believed that the training was sufficient to prepare them for those activities, and 82% believed that they received same or similar value as compared to an on-site approach. In terms of where to recommend this virtual activity, 80% believe that it could be used for all reappraisals or even for any appraisal. After completing our pilots, we did approve the virtual approach for all year one or more appraisals, multi-site appraisals, and certain time zone gaps. And lastly, I'll provide a quick update on VIP status. So our VIP Governing Committee was able to align its charter with the Case for Quality collaborative community. Our members and chair will continue to serve throughout the 2021 calendar year, and we recently approved our 2021 strategic and operationalization plan. Our VIP working groups have defined their objectives and deliverables for this year, starting with a monthly cadence and ad hoc subgroup meetings. We'll also attempt to have quarterly collaborative sessions so that we're all aligned towards our larger objectives. And transitioning from pilot to program, the Case for Quality collaborative community is finalizing the announcement for the formal transition from pilot to program. FDA is also planning to release additional supporting guidelines by the end of September. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Rob.
Thank you, Kim. And certainly with COVID and some other things happening in the world, it's great to know that we're back to transitioning from pilot to a full program. And that's very exciting. So I thought I'd give an update as an industry participant on what we've been doing for the last couple of years as a participant in the pilot. Next slide. So we were able to take advantage of the virtual appraisal, and we enrolled 4 more facilities, and they successfully completed the year one virtual appraisal. So that was a very positive experience for us, and we were happy to see that that pilot was able to be successful. As of 2021, Currently, we are fully enrolled for 7 of our 8 manufacturing sites worldwide. Our Singapore appraisal is scheduled for June of this year. And we've had good results both from ongoing sites that are year 2 and beyond, and our site here in Draper, Utah, which is a year 4 site. Next slide. So the nice thing for us is that we're still finding value at each of our sites. So for the site here, which is going through its 4th year appraisal, we're finding that the appraisal process is practical, we're able to scale it, and we're able to make it flexible to provide us feedback, and that's extremely valuable. So moving to increased levels, getting more information shared about the organization, but really also being able to target different areas. So if we have a new initiative or a new area for the site, or we want to get more feedback for a specific team or a specific subject matter, we're able to do that with our lead appraiser, and it helps us get more value out of the appraisal by being able to tailor it to our needs. And then we also have found that sharing objective evidence is a great supplement to the interview-based style of the appraisal. The objective evidence adds a little bit more time, but I think gives a more complete picture of the activities that are going on that sometimes don't come through a conversation. Next slide. So the biggest thing for us is, as we look at our global footprint and our manufacturing operations, is that the appraisal feedback we get from all of our sites really aligns with where we're trying to drive improvements as an overall company. And so automation, electronic systems, automated data reporting, manufacturing execution systems, continuing to evolve our organizational structure so that we have standard work, we have escalation criteria, the teams throughout the organization know what their priorities are, and then we have the metrics to help make those decisions for them on a day-to-day basis. And then continuing to manage projects, use lessons learned. That's probably a big one for us, that we've learned to do a better job with capturing, but also sharing those lessons with future teams so that we can continue to evolve and get better at execution. And then involving multiple stakeholders. Project management, for any size and scale project is generally complex, and getting all the stakeholders involved, chartering, going through those fundamental steps are important to a successful outcome. Next slide. And then we're also looking at what we can do and how this fits within our longer term corporate initiatives. And so one of those is internal standardization. And what we're doing is we're looking at the calendar, the business cycle for each site, and trying to figure out where the appraisal fits in so that it can get the right attention and it's not disruptive to a site as they go through a lot of the annual processes. And then we're also looking at our own continuous improvement framework and figuring out how we can align the appraisal to that internal process and where we see strengths and benefits of using one versus the other. Then generating playbooks and really communicating back to our teams, how do they set up for the appraisal? What are some things to look out for? We want to be good at being able to prepare for and make sure we have a good event. So it's more about the planning and the execution than it is about how to necessarily get a certain result. And then we've been working a lot establishing an internal case for quality community. So now that all of our sites are enrolled, how do we share best practices? How do we share common learnings? And how do we use mutual feedback from those sites to become better at understanding how to flex and how to manage the process so we get the most benefits out of it? And then the last thing we're working on is our appraisal team member pipeline. So we found a significant value in having internal appraisals team members, both from a company knowledge, but also an ability to really understand the results that we get and how to move forward most effectively. Next slide. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please reach out to Kim or myself, and we'd be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you for joining us online for the MDIC Case for Quality Forum. In this session, we'll be providing an overview of the Accelerate Sustainable Capability Pilot Study, which is also known as the ASC Pilot Study. My name is Catherine Merrill. I'm a Global Quality Program Director at Medtronic, and also on behalf of MDIC, I'm also acting as the Program Chair for the ASC Pilot Study. But before we get started, I did want to acknowledge and recognize we have a very engaged and experienced group of members from MDIC, ISACA, Management Control, the FDA, both CDRH and ORA, and as well as industry members like Baxter, Zimmer Biomet, and Medtronic. And they continue to be a very active and engaged group as we set up and provide oversight for the pilot study. Okay, next slide. So during this presentation, I will provide you with the reasons behind why a site might want to join the pilot. And then you'll have an opportunity to hear from Bleda Vunicki, the Case for Quality team lead at CDRH. And she will share about the pilot study from FDA's perspective. I'll then provide a high-level overview of the pilot study for those of you who are not yet familiar with the program. And after this presentation, if your site is interested in the pilot, I wanted to highlight that there's additional information on the MDIC website. There's a recorded webinar as well as a detailed playbook and FAQs. And you may also apply on the MDIC website as well. And you can also find additional information on the website of FDA. And then I'll close this session out by showing you the ways you can engage. Next slide. To start, I want to emphasize that the main purpose of the Accelerate Sustainable Capability Pilot Study is to facilitate a partnership between MDIC, FDA, and industry to help sites both address compliance issues and improve product quality. Why behind the reason FDA is partnering with MDIC and industry is that a singular focus on compliance has not resulted in a year-over-year improvement of product quality in the field. And since the CMMI appraisal process is already encouraging continuous improvement above and beyond compliance at manufacturing sites without compliance concerns, the real question is why not leverage what we have learned to help sites that need to focus on achieving higher levels of compliance. Next slide. Industry participants have begun to see the potential of the program. I've captured here a few quotes that help demonstrate this support. First, leadership at one of the ASC pilot sites stated that the pilot has enabled a heightened level of transparency and active collaboration between industry and FDA to achieve substantial compliance. Similarly, Zimmer Biomet statement communicates that the pilot study aligned with their commitment to the highest standards of patient safety and that they see it as an opportunity to enhance their quality system using the ASC pilot study tools to ensure that quality and compliance improvements are long-lasting and continuous for their patients. Finally, Medtronic communicated their valuable experience with the Voluntary Improvement Program, also known as VIP, and the ASC pilot does look like another opportunity to partner with FDA and identify ways to improve for sites that are still maturing. Of the 9 pilot site slots available within the program, the pilot is looking for 2 or more self-identifying sites, 2 or more sites with 483s but no compliance action, and 2 or more sites with advisory actions such as the warning letter or an untitled letter or a regulatory meeting. 3 sites have already enrolled, and based on this, I wanted to mention here that we are especially interested in sites with an advisory action, either the warning letter, untitled letter, or the regulatory meeting. So if you have a site that meets this criteria, we would definitely encourage you to apply. Next slide. As you consider whether your organization would like to participate, I wanted to provide you some encouragement by letting you know that the pilot study was deliberately designed to help facilitate an environment of collaboration and transparency between FDA and a pilot site. There are regular touch points with FDA during the pilot outside the traditional inspection environment. And with these engagements, the pilot is working to enable clear expectations and alignment as an organization creates their action plans, which is expected to contribute to the faster closure of regulatory concerns as well. Also, participating sites will be able to take advantage of the organizational excellence improvements that come from the CMMI appraisal, which will be evaluated to determine if these results do result in faster closure of regulatory concerns and longer lasting or more sustainable gap closures. Finally, the pilot study was designed to bring to the forefront the common objectives between both FDA and industry. It was built upon the premise that both industry and FDA have patient safety as their primary guiding principle. So the pilot study can be used to help shape the work towards achieving the common goal of increased product quality. So now I want to hand it over to Bleda. And like I said earlier, Bleda Vanicki is the Case for Quality team lead at FDA, and she will be sharing from the FDA's perspective about the pilot study.
Thank you, Catherine. The pilot is facilitated by MDIC. The FDA's participation in the ASC pilot is an example of continued efforts to ensure patients and providers have access to safe and effective high-quality medical devices. The agency continues to meet its mission by proactively engaging with participating sites in a different venue and getting the participating manufacturers in a state of sustainable compliance and promote continuous improvement and organizational excellence to drive beyond that baseline compliance state. There is a need to test out new tools to evaluate an organization's quality maturity that fosters continuous improvement and focuses beyond meeting the regulatory requirements. The intent of the Case for Quality initiative as a whole is to help shift the culture within the medical device industry to focus on improvements and reach a maturity beyond what is expected by the regulatory requirements. As Catherine will mention soon, the pilot leverages the lessons learned from the Case for Quality VIP and uses the capability maturity model integration, so CMMI process, and behavior model adapted to the medical device industry to go beyond assessing compliance with regulatory requirements, which is something that organizations are used to, and to evaluate the effectiveness of the manufacturer's quality system. The appraisal approach prioritizes safety, focuses on integrating quality throughout the entire organization, including units that are not in scope of regulatory authority. So typically areas that an FDA investigator, for example, won't have a chance to evaluate, but those areas significantly impact product quality and identifies the practices that will improve processes, results, and value. The pilot also incorporates the residual risk tool, which assesses the publicly available market data by creating and comparing the overall residual risk experience with a specific medical device against that risk, which is typically found inherited to that device. Issues that may raise to a level of concern are considered as inputs to appraisal and to the manufacturer's actions plan. So if you are a site that has received an advisory action, so warning letter or entitle letter, or a site that the agency has requested a regulatory meeting, you are eligible to apply. And we encourage you to consider participating in this pilot study. As part of the application process, the agency will provide enrollment recommendation to MDIC, who makes the final decision. Both CDRH and ORA review team is involved in providing input to this recommendation. Applying to the pilot shows the firm's commitment to the and its intent to focus on improvements. So as I explained earlier, the CMMI assessment and the residual risk tool are intended to help focus the organization's improvement efforts and complement the work that may have already been initiated to address the compliance violations previously noted by the agency. The agency also has the opportunity to engage and provide input to the work plan, which is developed as part of this pilot study, and to ensure that the organizational improvements are on the right track and will address the violations previously noted. Next slide, please. As you'll see in this slide, the ACRA has stated that ORA recognizes the factors that are evidencing the critical need to shift from compliance-based to quality-centric paradigms for regulatory oversight. She further states that ORA is fully committed to the goal of optimizing its inspectional approaches to medical device manufacturing in order to enhance product quality. And one way they intend to advance this goal is through the support of this pilot, the ASC pilot study. Similarly, CDRH's Center Director, Dr. Sharon, has stated that ASC pilot study is an example of the center's collaborations to develop new approaches to improve safety and quality while enabling a path for manufacturer success. He further stated that CDRH is fully committed and will engage with participating manufacturers to test out the use of quality system maturity and residual risk assessment tools to help focus their efforts to achieve systemic quality and compliance improvements. As Catherine mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, both ORA as well as CDRH participants are involved in the working group and were part of the designing of this pilot study to help those sites that need help to continue their improvement efforts. Catherine, I'm going to turn it over to you to provide an additional overview of the pilot.
Thank you, Bleda. Now with this slide, I'm going to walk you through a quick overview of the pilot study for those of you who may not be as familiar with the program. And as Bleda said, the pilot study leverages lessons learned from the VIP program and modifies its use for sites that have identified compliance concerns or are under a compliance action. So the first thing I'm going to walk through are the main elements of the pilot study. So you can go ahead and click. It's an 18-month pilot study following the initial CMMI appraisal completed at your site. And I did want to highlight that the team is currently working to enable both virtual and on-site appraisals as a result of COVID. So there's also a quarterly residual risk assessment completed by a tool developed by the company called Management Control, and it's leveraging publicly available MOD data associated with a specific pilot site. So this, for those of you who are familiar with the Voluntary Improvement Program, this would be new for you. That's a part of this pilot study. But similar to VIP, there's a quarterly report out of improvement progress to CMMI and a quarterly report of performance metrics to FDA. There will also be regularly collected lessons learned throughout the pilot to help shape subsequent activities and next steps following the pilot. And when applicable, the FDA's reinspection will not only provide FDA with what they would typically be coming to reinspect for, it'll also provide a data point regarding the effectiveness of the pilot. So for all these elements, you'll see that they're similar to VIP, but that all the activities will now be focused on the processes associated with the identified compliance concerns. The benefits expected from the pilot are that a site will benefit from the organizational excellence opportunities identified during the CMMI appraisal to help them both sustain compliance and improve product quality. Next, we expect the residual risk tool results to help the site prioritize which improvements to go after. And as mentioned earlier, this pilot also provides sites with a unique opportunity to partner with both MDIC and FDA to improve. And lastly, and most importantly, the cost of the pilot will be covered by MDIC, both for the CMMI appraisal and the residual risk assessment tool provided by Management Control. So now you can click. If you do decide to join the pilot, and we really hope you do, you might be asking, what are the expectations of a pilot site? So first, the site would be responsible for creating an action plan, which consists of identifying the compliance gaps which must be addressed. They must also consider the information provided by the residual risk assessment tool to help prioritize which opportunities should be addressed that were identified during the CMMI appraisal. The next thing a pilot site would be expected to do is that they must engage with quarterly checkpoints with CMMI, where they will report on action plan status and then send the performance metrics to FDA. Finally, there's an expectation of collaboration and transparency during the pilot study, which is similar to what is expected in VIP. Click again. As I mentioned earlier, there are only 9 sites permitted in the pilot study. So do not hesitate to reach out to MDIC or the Case for Quality team at FDA if you have any questions. If you do decide to apply, you can go to the MDIC website, submit your application online, and you will be notified of your pilot status within 2 weeks. And because participation is limited, we would like to encourage you again not to wait too long to apply. We thank you for your interest in the pilot study, and we're here to support you if you have any questions. So thank you again for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the first session of the Case for Quality April Forum. We're starting to get into our live session now, so I've got our speakers are joining us for the live Q&A. And you can see that some of our speakers are already here. So we've got Bleda, Catherine, and Rob. And we have been taking questions during the tape session. So we do have some questions that I'll take a look at and ask the group. We've got one question right away that I wanted to share with the team. And I don't know if, Bleda, this might be for you, but it has to do with experience that you've seen or FDA has seen with regard to marking of product. And in terms of, I'm just having some trouble pulling it up for some reason here. Hang on a minute. Can you see that question in the chat, Bleda?
Yes, I can. The question is, have you experienced or are you concerned about incidences of non-compliant or non-scanning barcodes marking regulated products? I assume that is in response to the ASC pilot that we just presented on, which is the pilot specifically developed to help those sites that are not in compliance. So part of that pilot, FDA will continue to have oversight of those facilities that are enrolled in the pilot. We will continue to get metrics data on the sites that are enrolled, appraisal aggregate results, as well as engage with the site. We are a regulatory agency, so if we see that there is a shift in how the products are doing in the field or pose a risk to health, then we will engage with the site, potentially even issue directed inspections to follow up. But the intent of the pilot is to proactively engage with those sites that are enrolled. And the intent is to help them continue to improve, raise the bar of quality products that they manufacture. So far, we have not seen any issues, especially part of the Case for Quality VIP, which a lot of the activities were leveraged from to develop the ASC pilot.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bleda. Another question for the ASC group team, Bleda and Catherine. In one of the questions we have, and can you talk a little bit more? I know we're in the pilot phase now. We're engaging with pilot sites. They're getting their appraisals. But coming out of an appraisal, what's the conversation going to be like in terms of sharing successful practices and lessons learned so that sites can improve. And we can, are we planning on sharing things like, we've seen it done well in this particular example. You might want to think about using this in your particular case. Help sites or folks sort of understand what it might be like after the initial appraisal and what that dialogue might look like or sound like.
So Blada, I could speak to the appraisal and the checkpoints afterwards, and maybe you can speak to how the FDA engagement will happen. Okay, so as far as an appraisal, for those of you that are familiar with the Voluntary Improvement Program, where there's an appraisal process and follow-up checkpoints, it will be something that's very similar with quarterly checkpoints that are completed with the sites. And during that time, you get to engage with your lead appraiser, and they are very experienced on the model, which is a compilation of best practices in and of itself. And so you do get to learn about those best practices out in industry with that standard methodology, but you also have access to the lead appraiser's experience, and they have appraised many other organizations in industry, and they are very helpful in providing lessons learned and engaging you on what might be best for your site, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, in addition to that, when we developed the ASC pilot, we definitely considered how do we want to capture feedback throughout the pilot and after the pilot. So we put together questionnaires, focal groups where we can engage with the different sites with CMMI, residual risk assessment tool, team, and everyone to provide input. It is a pilot study, so we're intending to learn as much as possible from the experience in order to better understand how can we move forward and continue helping the sites that need assistance to get to that, meeting that bar line of compliance, and then continuing to continuous improvement efforts. FDA will also engage throughout the pilot, as Catherine mentioned, from the action plan that is developed after the initial appraisal. One of the actions for the site is to work together with the CMMI appraisers to put together an action plan of what are the issues that they plan to address. The action plan includes all the different inputs from the different activities, including the appraisal, the residual risk tool, FDA inspections, external audits or internal audits, a list of all improvement efforts, and planning of how which ones matter more and have a bigger impact and need to be addressed first. FDA will have an opportunity to provide feedback in that action plan. As well as we will receive a status report of that action plan monthly, as well as the residual risk report. So we will continue to be engaged throughout the pilot, and we want to be a partner with those sites that are enrolled, as well as we're a partner with the MDIC pilot as a whole. Both ORA and CDRH have been heavily involved in the pilot and providing feedback and input and working together with industry members, as Catherine had mentioned earlier, MDIC, CMMI, and the Management Controlled Inc., the third party that currently is working on the residual risk tool.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to shift gears and move to a VIP question. So Rob, you mentioned in the presentation about objective evidence. Can you talk a little bit more about what that objective evidence looks like in an appraisal versus when people hear about objective evidence in reaction to an audit question?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. So one of the things we've learned at the site, and we're going through and gone through our fourth appraisal, is that especially as you go from level 2 to level 3, there's a element of what you do as a site that doesn't completely come through just through the appraisal process. And we wanted to maximize the feedback we get. And so some examples of that are governance, where we go through a strategic planning process for the site. We try and figure out from all our stakeholders what our priorities need to be, and then we communicate those to employees. And so there's an element of that that comes through the interviews, through the appraisal. But what we're able to do is share the strategic planning information and documents that we created as part of that process, showed the process we go through as a site for how we do our intake and some of those elements. And so it gave a more complete picture of that part of how the site operates. And another one would be, we've spent a lot of time on project management. And so, during the appraisal, we may target a few project teams to go through and support the appraisal process. But in addition to that, we've given some background on, how our process works, some examples of project charters, closure through lessons learned, and just been able to give a little bit more both structural and/or examples of some of these key processes, so that the lead appraiser and the appraisal team has a little bit more information to go off of before they go into the appraisal and have just the conversations with those employees. We find that gives us a more complete picture of some of those key processes and better feedback for where our opportunities are.
Okay, great. So in the time we have left with the live Q&A, I'm going to ask the last question, and I'm going to be started with Catherine. We're going to end with Catherine. So Catherine, you talked about the Make CAPA Cool and the fast track and the advantages of the fast track. We do know that through our culture of quality today, that many companies are still in this reactive mode, right? They really want to be much more preventive and much more, in much more of a preventive measures. So help me understand, how does the Make CAPA Cool help? Is it starting to promote more preventive CAPAs? Do you see a phase change, as you talk about transformation? Help me understand that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the team really did put a lot of thought and effort into how they designed the risk-based approach that we're proposing. And we had a lot of discussions and interactions around how would we build a framework that would reward organizations for the quality behaviors we were looking for. One of those, like being more preventive, building stronger controls and monitoring systems, building more understanding into the business around the risks, QMS, product risks. So preventive was one of the things we wanted to make sure that the system actually rewarded organizations for. So the way it does this is it promotes and encourages them to complete preventative actions using the fast track CAPA system before it gets to a level where it needs to be escalated to the more traditional CAPA approach. So, and the exciting part to your question, Joe, about are we seeing this? We actually are seeing within our pilot organizations a drive to be more preventive, discussions at the leadership level of we need to really be executing those preventive actions within the fast track CAPA system. And we're actually seeing users provide feedback that they're excited to be able to implement their improvements using the fast track CAPA system, because it's not seen as an obstacle to getting work done, but more as a mechanism for getting improvement done, which really is quite exciting to see.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all. I think we're near the end of our morning session that completes not only the pre-recorded, but the live session. So I want to thank Bleda, Rob, and Catherine for not only today's time, but the time you put into preparing for today's session, the taping sessions, and we look forward to the afternoon session. So everyone, if you've signed up for today's session, we'll have a break and then we'll start the afternoon session around 1 p.m. Eastern. So thank you all for joining us and have a great day.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.